Hello, and welcome to My Favorite Games, a podcast for game designers to geek out about games they like to play. Today, I'm super excited to host Tim OBrien. Tim is one half of the founding duo of Chaotic Great Games. He grew up playing card games, board games, and miniature games in whatever local game store he could get his mom to take him to. And now he's on a mission to make games that get played. More about that in a little bit. But Tim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So before we kind of get into your background and the games that you've made, the kind of game that you've brought to the figurative desert island with you today is the Star Wars living card game.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about it. What is it, and why do you like it so much?
Well, first of all, it's a dead game in that it's a living card game that has unfortunately stopped living. So it's no longer being supported in any official way. But for the too brief a period of time that it was supported, it was such a special time in my life. That game really brought me back into the games that I loved, or the reasons why I loved playing games when I was a kid, and reinvigorated that. It introduced me to a whole new group of gamers. I started traveling to play that game, and it really just it brought back everything that I loved about games from my childhood when I found it in my 30s, I think, or early 30s is when I came across it.
So what's special about it?
So many things.
How does it work, I guess, also?
Yeah, first of all, it's about Star Wars. It might be the only Star Wars game. Is that true? No, I think that there have been quite a few since.
There've been a couple, yeah.
Yeah, actually. I started with the X-Wing miniatures game, produced by the same company, Fantasy Flight, and then noticed that they were doing card games. And the model is different. So I'm sure a lot of listeners know, but the living card game model is essentially when you buy the card game, you're getting everything, rather than like an MTG or Pokemon where you're getting random stuff to play game pieces. And so I think what Fantasy Flight was trying to do, if I can project, and what they accomplished, was lure people like me who weren't ready for a lifestyle game again, like Magic, but had played Magic in the past and loved the idea of deck construction, playing card games in a more competitive sense, like a game that you could really dive into. They brought me back into the hobby with this model that was much more approachable. So they were doing 2 big box releases a year, and then probably with the Star Wars LCG, maybe 12 packs a year. So all in, you were, spending $200 to $300 a year to keep up with this game, but it was still changing in the same way that Magic changed. In a way that a new card would come out, or a new pack of cards would come out. And I just remember looking at those cards and then looking at literally every single card that existed for the game again, either physically or on an online deck builder, to be like, okay, does this break the game in this way? Because I want to rebuild all of these decks and bring them to my game store and show up and be my friends with them. So well done on them for hitting that mark with the living card game model.
And what kind of brought you in? You said you were starting with the Star Wars, Star Wars miniatures and stuff. Was it very much Star Wars? Oh yeah, this is a game. Oh, I remember some of these. Or what? Take us back to your childhood then.
Sure.
Let's talk about your childhood. What were the kind of games? What were the kind of games that you were playing that you were that it kind of reminded you of?
Yeah, so Star Wars definitely helped. Like I said, I was playing X-Wing, and I'm surrounded by Star Wars art at the moment. But what hooked me was this great company out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Team Covenant, posted a video of the regional finals for the Star Wars card game. It was just pretty, I hope they don't mind me saying this, low budget at the time. Their videos have gotten better. But it was just a camera on these 2 people playing...
Minimalist.
Yeah, minimalist. There you go. They were playing for glory, and the kind of idea that there was this whole metagame outside the game happening, and they knew each other's moves in a way. They were so intimately familiar with the meta game So they were playing they were like, oh, he needs to play this resource so he can have 6 resources so he can finally play Emperor Palpatine, and that's going to be the way that the dark side wins, but you're going to prevent that as the light side by really aggressively attacking the 2 resource objective. And so I just remember watching that and being like, oh, right, this is what I crave. And so for your other question about what I grew up playing, I was a Magic player. I particularly liked limited environments, draft environments, because I didn't have a lot of money. But I could scrounge together $9 to $12, I think, where the packs were $3 back then, if you can remember back in the day before.
Yeah, back in the 40s, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And just going to the local game store and competing, having games be a way to scratch the itch. I think I'm an unapologetically competitive person. I like the idea of being all in on something. That doesn't mean I don't love a casual sit down game where you can just be all into the theme of a game. But I always was drawn to competitive play, tournament play. So was Magic. I played the Mage Knight miniatures game competitively for a while to some pretty decent success. So I've always loved that. I've always loved following along with the competitive meta, whether it's on, back in the day it was forums. You could go to mkrealms.com to keep up with the Mage Knight meta, or with these living card games, there was a great podcast community that was kind of keeping you up to date with tournament results from Germany. You go, oh, what's the German meta doing? What's happening out in Ohio? How are they trying to break these games? And I've always loved that, being able to engage with a game outside of the time that you're playing the game. There's more to it than the 45 minutes that you're sitting down. It's you're bringing all this knowledge beforehand.
You're planning, you're strategizing. Yeah.
Totally. And so that was a lot of my childhood was spent in front of a computer trying to win the game before playing the game.
Yeah. So when thinking about living card games, I know you were saying, living card games are distinct from trading card games Magic and some of these others, in that you have everything that you need to get started. But you also have, the good living card games do live, or that they allow you to expand and to keep adding new cards. So how would you... why are living, or do you think that living card games, how would you differentiate them then versus, let's say, a trading card game with a good base deck?
Yeah.
If someone's looking at something
right.
like Magic,
right.
They know it's so expansive, but there are also some living card games that are
yeah.
They come out with several new decks a year, right? So.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was, I just happened to be on Reddit this morning. By just happened to be, I'm
happened to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For the first time ever. No,
you're once monthly.
Yeah. But I still love Magic. I have Commander decks behind me right now. But someone said on this forum post, it was what's a good budget build for this? And that's happening with Lorcana too now, and Star Wars Unlimited. And I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and I remember the feeling a lot of the time about going to a PTQ, the Pro Tour qualifiers, and not having a deck because of money that could compete. And that's a feels bad moment, right? You're just here to play this game. I have time to invest in this game so I can get good at the mechanics of it, but I can't compete because Rishidan ports are $30, and my job at the time was at a grocery store and I was making $6 an hour. And so that math didn't really math out for me. So when I saw that post, I was there's some tragedy of someone having to say I want to play this game and I want to play it at the highest level, and this other game, capitalism, happens to be getting in the way of my ability to play it. So I love collectability. I have fond memories of opening booster packs and finding the card that I want. That is a fun thing. I love it. But when it takes away from gameplay, I think that there's a loss there. And especially when it becomes aggressive. And I don't know where that line is, but like I was put off of, and I love the game, but I was put off of Flesh and Blood for that reason, where it really was like, I think at the time I was looking at it like, $600 or $700 to start with a competitive play, and you wouldn't even be able to then quickly pivot to something else and like get the other play experience of a different, I think they're called heroes in that game. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, there's something there that's sad. And so I've been interested in, we'll talk about this later with Gudnack, of the idea that, collectability seems like it's the way to create long-lasting games, which are great. Like Magic and Pokemon have lasted and are extremely collectible. And it looks like Flesh and Blood has a shot, and it looks like Lorcana and Unlimited both have a shot. And they're all great games. And a lot of the competitive living card games have died, like Game of Thrones and Netrunner, and the game we're talking about, Star Wars LCG, have, not been able to make it at the scale that those bigger companies want them to make it at. So there is something going on, like some tension going on. I think, unfortunately, we're defaulting to the same strategies we were in 1992. Is that when Magic came out? And actually even going further in that direction for the newer card games. I think they're starting with a level of collectability that Magic did not intend to have. So they're starting with the legendary, 2 per box, 3 per box type of thing. So I am interested in exploring, like figuring out a way to kind of diverge gameplay excellence from collectability and still create something that's long lasting. I don't think that I have figured that out, but I think it's a great topic,
So I mean, definitely would love to explore that from the perspective of Gudnack as well. But why do you think that is? I mean, look, on the surface, if you were trying to launch some sort of new, like, Lorcana, right? Launch a new, massive collectible card game. Why do you think that it doesn't make sense, or why do you think most of the living card games aren't seen as an effective route to do that? Like on the surface, it would seem like, look, we're gonna make the barrier of entry really low, and then the collectability is gonna just make it so much more fun that people are just gonna want to keep expanding and expanding. Versus, we're actually gonna make we're gonna make it quite hard for you to get going. But once you're in, you have to be in because you spent all this money already. So on the surface, it seems like one actually is a quicker route to testing it out and and building it. So why do you think that isn't the first the first approach? Yeah.
So I think first there's the economic reality that card games are expensive to produce. If you think about the things that make, as a publisher, a game expensive, kind of start and end with art. So there's logistics, but those are kind of a fixed cost. But the more unique art pieces you have in the game, I think the more money that you're going to be spending on that game. So if you think about a deck of cards with a unique piece of art, especially a piece of high quality art, is going to cost exponentially more than a game with one piece of unique art on the board, one piece of unique art on the box, maybe some rulebook spot illustrations, and then we're done. Maybe some iconography, right? So they just cost a lot in the before you get to production. Now, the nice thing about them is that you can then produce them pretty cheap, because components wise they're not that bad. But continuing to produce content for them is hard. The second part of that is that if it's competitive, playtesting and supporting that become very difficult, because as you add a card to a pool of 20 cards, that's easy. You add a card to a pool of 2,000 cards, just look at the judge forms for Magic the Gathering's Eternal formats. Like, these people should have PhDs. They know more about that game than PhDs know about their field of topics. No, not to disparage PhDs. I'm sure they're also very smart.
Yeah, they're awful people. Yeah,
yeah, they're the worst. That's what I came here to talk about. Yes. So I think that those are realities. And then for the specifics of the living card game is, I think card games, the competitive card games, rely on the game store, and the game store doesn't have a big incentive to support the living card game. So Friday Night Magic makes a game store a considerable amount of money incidentally, right? Like people will just show up and they're not even there like with the intent of purchasing new things. They're just purchasing things that they already have in stock, like old stock. And so then as a result, look at all of the focus. Any LGS that you walk into has a literal wall of boxes of Magic behind the counter, right? And then a case of Magic singles. And that's what's driving them. And the same is true for, Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And now increasingly Lorcana and Unlimited. So, they're just making money off those players in a way that a $15 pack every month can't really compete with. And so, I think if you're a profit-driven game company making a card game and you see one model that, produces, a good LGS might sell 10 to 20 packs of a competitive living card game. And so what's their margin on that going to be, like $6, $6 to $8 a pack? And so like, oh, great, we made $100 off this game. And then if they support organized play, maybe they can get some tournament fees. But I mean, we're at less than $1,000 a month, right? And so it's just not making a real impact on their bottom line. And if that detracts from Magic in any way, it's like, just get out of here. Like I won't be, my doors won't open if without Magic. And like, this is a cute game and I'm glad that y'all are having fun with it, but it's hard for them to participate. But I think, to your point, like it is a great way to get people involved, like me involved. As a result, I think the model's working really well for cooperative games, like the Arkham Horror LCG, crushing it, Lord of the Rings LCG, crushing it. Because, and then Marvel Champions. You don't kind of need that same need to buy every pack competitiveness. But the people who want to buy everything will continue to buy everything. You develop this followership and keep producing content. So I think that there's something there. I just think it didn't, pan out, particularly when trying to go head to head with Magic.
Yeah. So then looking at Gudnack, your game, you call it, you refer to it as a tactical expandable card game.
Yeah.
First off, I guess, tell us, what is it? Who's it for?
Yeah, it's for me. I made it for myself.
Great.
And hopefully there's at least one or two other people out there like me so that we can play 2 or 4 player games of it. But yeah, it's a card game built with a lot of the principles I was talking about. So it is competitive by nature. It has a metagame to it. It's built with the philosophy that it can be studied deeply to be competitive. But it's not collectible. You're spending $40 for the base game and getting all of the cards. There's 2 expansions coming out, and that's where we want to keep it. The reason why we call it tactical and expandable is it is played on a board, so it looks different than Magic in that positioning matters. It's played on a 3x3 grid for the 2-player game. And your objective is to get your fighters, creatures, and Magic terms across that board and siege your opponent's stronghold. And in terms of the business model of it, I think what's different about it for us, like from the beginning, is we don't have a huge IP or stockholders to appease. It's myself and my co-founder Ian. So we get a lot of freedom in that. Like there's a nice thing about being able to do what we want with the game I'm going to sound maybe immodest, but like we really do want to make it a game for players to be played. So we make decisions that I think are not incredibly smart monetarily, because the first purpose of this game is that we want it to hit tables and be played. And then maybe not even secondarily, like way down the list is if it could make enough money to sustain itself, that would be great. But it is not relied upon to deliver shareholder value in any way, nor do we have to pay some licensing fee to have it. and again, I don't want to come across as knocking those games. I love those games. Those are the reasons why I play games. But it allows us to be, I think, a little bit more experimental with the game and the model.
So what are some of those things that what are some of those decisions that you've made?
Okay. Have you ever played video games? Do you know video games? So
once I don't think it'll last.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. So I think I played League of Legends back in my day, and Fortnite's doing this. So what they're doing is taking gameplay and democratizing it, and then using cosmetics as their monetization. Yep. So the base game of Gudnack, if you look at the Kickstarter campaign, we're very art forward. We've worked with a single artist, Vittoria Pompolani, for every piece of art in the game. I like to hold the game box and point to random things and be like, she also drew that. She also drew that. Like the pieces of wood grain on the box. I'm like, she drew that. That little tree, she drew that. But really early on, we unlocked this concept because we love art. Myself and Ian both come from a design background. That's how we met. And we spent forever selecting Vittoria from this list of artists that we wanted to work with. And so during the Kickstarter campaign, we said, like, why don't we bring in some of those artists to create variants of cards for the game? So in Kickstarter 1, it comes with, as voted by the community, 4 alternate art cards for fighters in the game that you can bling out your deck with. And for Kickstarter 2, we're going even more heavily in that direction. So we're working with, I think the list is up to 25 artists right now. And these are people that, like, it's truly like, it's crazy to think that I'm working with these people. Like, these are people who did illustrations for the original Magic the Gathering set, current Magic the Gathering artists who are working on like really key pieces for them, like amazing artists to produce art for Gudnack, with the idea that could be a way for our players to engage more deeply with the game without tying it to like, oh, give me the best budget friendly build. The idea is, like, if you want to show up and play a competitive game of Gudnack at your local game store or at some of the tournaments that we're going to host, like, you're going to be competitive no matter what deck you play. It could also be cool that you show up and your Ever King is illustrated by Mark Poole, and like, you're like, oh my god, that guy is like, he's a legend in this community, and now he's in my deck, and like, I want that, and your deck is shinier than mine. And so we'll have a product available. And that will be semi-collectible. So if people come meet us at PAX Unplugged, we're giving away samples of that product. We also love to reward players for meeting us in person with that type of thing. So anytime people have met us at a con, they've received shiny versions of cards that are con exclusive. And the same will be true for playing in tournaments. So at Unplugged, we're hosting our 2024 championships, and there'll be the ability to earn some cool art-based prizes there. So that's our current theory. It's an experiment. It's not out in the wild yet, but we think that there's a there. It certainly was a big draw for me as a competitive player. Like, I loved the idea of going to a tournament, doing well. Actually, framed right over there is a Star Wars living card game playmat that I won for doing well in a tournament. So there's, like I said, I'm building a game for me and the things that I like. So.
Like what you describe, especially when it comes to having the expandable nature of it. I know that it expands in other ways, but like some of the collectability parts of aspects of it based off of art, also based off of specific artists. It sounds like this is for a community that is quite knowledgeable about a lot of these card games in the first place. They're already fans of the wider genre of collectible card games and living card games. So that, it's like, the types of wines that are only appropriate if you're a wine connoisseur, otherwise you wouldn't get it. It kind of comes across in that way, in a very accessible way, but like in a way. So the question beneath all of that snobbery is, how did you develop this kind of community? Because I imagine that a game like this, you're not working with an existing IP, and it's a lot of. I would imagine that would require a pretty large and engaged community before you even think to put it on Kickstarter or kind of launch it. So how did that happen?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's still happening, and I think I'm a firm believer in that. Like, if you put that energy out in the world, you can attract the people that love what you love. And we did talk about this early on. Is like, do we try to create a product that is more marketable and has more broad appeal, but is less deeply loved by the people who share the same passion as us?
Yeah.
And we made the decision to go that other direction and say, like, let's make a game that is our favorite game to play. And our favorite game to play with the people who love to play this kind of game. And just, I mean, Essen was a few weeks ago. If you've ever been to PAX Unplugged, there is going to be a game for another group of people. And my, closets behind me, just like yours, are filled with other games that can scratch other itches. Every time I go to a game night, there is something for that group, right? Like, no matter the configuration with the tens of thousands of games. So I would say, without being preachy, but like my advice to people would be like, I think it's okay to like have something that's pretty specific. It's in its appeal. I mean, if you don't want to become a billionaire in this industry, which I would not recommend people get into this industry with that in mind. It's I think it's smaller than you think. Like our first Kickstarter, which I would consider successful, had 924 backers. So that's not going to make anyone rich, but my hope is that those 924 are going to love the product so much that they play it with someone else, and then that person also loves it, rather than, if it were broader, 2,000 people and, they never play the game. I don't know if this has happened to you, but a lot of people's houses that I go to, and, I'm going to shamefully admit this, there is an unopened Kickstarter game that they backed with a lot of reward tiers, and it looked really cool and had broad appeal and maybe had an IP attached to it, and it's not getting played. And there's a lot of that. And so I think that's what Ian and I talked about, is like the purpose of this game is to find the niche, the community that loves it, that really digs it and wants to just play it until the cards are worn out, rather than like, it could be purchased by twice as many people, but no one's really like obsessed with it. So yeah, I think that's it. And then just as a tactic for that, I think what we realized early on, and this will parlay into why we're not in game stores, is that this game needs to be taught. It needs to be introduced. So like we have, worked with a lot of creators to show the game being played. We ourselves have played the game on camera and done teaching games, and the distributor we're working with, Team Covenant, their model is that they don't just sell games, they introduce their audience to games through video content. And that's the reason why we are so convention forward in our strategy, is we know that the best way to be introduced to this game is by sitting down with someone who already loves this game and kind of gets you into it. It doesn't take forever to learn, but it's a great game to sit down, play your first game, and have a lot of like Q&A about it. Like, oh, what's their like strategy for expanding, and like what's like this, and I only played one faction, there are 6 factions, what are the others like? Or are they making new factions? Like, what are those going to be like? So that has informed some of our model, is that it does have to be, not have to be, but it's best when taught, and that helps us create community as well. But I think, to really directly answer your question, in this industry, I don't think these have to be huge communities. We're not talking about tens of thousands of people. We're a first-time publisher. We have no profit goals in mind. Like, we want to get this thing published and played, and you can do that with a couple hundred people.
So, I mean, you obviously your first Kickstarter went pretty well. As you said, 940 backers, but you raised over $100,000 with it. So,
yep.
From at least from the outside, that looks pretty engaged in terms of an audience and a success, and you're going back to Kickstarter as well, and I know that you kind of talked about this a little bit, but from a strategy perspective, you talk about how the game needs to be taught, it needs to be experienced. So your strategy has been to be very kind of convention forward in your approach. Was that always the plan? Like, when you were thinking about this, it comes across as a very organic process. We want to make a game that is the perfect game for us. What influenced your decision or your thinking around, don't try and go for an IP, develop a community ourselves? What watering holes did you go to in order to start that process? Why weren't you thinking of, or did you think of pitching it to a publisher or to another, especially maybe one that has produced other types of card games before? What was your thinking about that in terms of how you it's very easy to think, oh, I have an idea for a game, it's going to be massive, and actually making some pretty key decisions to try and get that to happen.
Yeah. I think, selfishly, we wanted to retain control of this thing all the way to the finish line. And I think there was just we both had, between us, we had a level of interest in enough parts of the process that we felt it was worth it to go end to end with it. Like, I've been playing games for years and had no idea about the manufacturing process or the logistics behind it. And so there's this curiosity that led us to that in terms of not going with a publisher. And then, the other side of it, just being able to keep that creative control between myself and Ian and our artist, has been very freeing, and allowed us to make, some decisions that, if you gave the game away, and so then I can't deny that there's also this economic reality, and that we don't have to rely on Gudnack for to feed our children. So that is, a difference. Like, we can treat this as a passion project, because in many ways it is. So, there wasn't that like push to be like, you must sell X copies of this game in order to like pay your mortgage. So that's just a reality.
Do you think it could turn into that?
Not
from a pressure, not from a pressure standpoint, but for you actually saying, you know what,
yeah, for sure, and that's the intent. Yeah. But in talking to people, like, and really just like watching first time publishers, I think that my current theory is that doesn't happen until the second printing plus. So you need to like really see the sell through on the first print. If it goes well, then you have something that can sustain and really, pay you for, years of work that it takes to create another game. But this game took 2.5 years of development of spare time, and there's no way, there's almost no reality in which the economics of a board game could have, without us going into a lot of debt, like paid us back for that time. So it's almost like we're hoping that this goes well, and then we'll see what the second print run and the second Kickstarter go like, to see if there's a there, or if we have to go back to the drawing board and continue with it as an ancillary source of income. So yeah, I think that's the reason why there. And then, Kickstarter, selfishly, as two people who had full-time jobs during the creation of this and have children, I think there's something nice about having dates to rally towards.
Deadlines.
Totally, right? Like, let's be real, I'm not a robot. I too get lazy and want to watch television instead of tweaking rules text in a expansion rulebook. So, there's something nice about just being like, this is when it is. And the other thing is, you can really focus your all of your energy on that particular thing. So it is a very different feeling when you are in marketer game designer mode from game designer mode. And it's nice to be able to like switch off your brain from game designer mode and be like, it is time to be hype man. Like, I'm just going to go tweet a lot and put a lot of Instagram stories up and like, like be responding to like all the backer questions and, sending out like all those updates and updating the page all the time. It takes a lot of work. And so to like have that be a condensed period of time and then be like, okay, that's done. Now I can go into logistics mode because like now I'm fulfilling these is nice. And I don't know the other side of it, but it seemed like a little bit messier to me to be doing those kind of like simultaneously. And so that's why we're going back really, is to say we're in the final stages of playtesting for all of the content for the March Kickstarter, which will then give us a few months to gear up all those marketing efforts, and then we can kind of go into that. And so we weren't as luxurious with our timeline on the first one. We were still playtesting towards the end of that campaign, getting playtest feedback. But this has been really nice because we're like, okay, like we're fully in playtest mode. We're out of development and design mode, and then we can like fully transition to this other thing. So there's just a selfishness to it. And Kickstarter really has just become this like moment in time marketing push more than it is like an actual way to receive capital to produce games. I mean, I think depending on where you at financially, like you can certainly get a loan in the size of a Kickstarter amount to go produce a game for, a couple hundred people. If you wanted to go into debt to finance it, which would act similarly to how Kickstarter works, but for us it's
but it's not the marketing. Yeah,
exactly. It's just like there's this whole like community around like pushing the Kickstarter during the Kickstarter, and it's exciting.
So you're is Gudnack Kickstarter 2 like are you guys working on any other games at the moment?
Yeah, so Gudnack's not the only game, or it's not scratching the only game itch that I have. So yeah, nothing that we've announced yet, but I guess the tease of it is I'm a big Star Wars fan, and Gudnack is set in a sword and sorcery place, so there's certainly some IP to explore there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Still thinking about continuing the love affair with cards and card games?
Yeah, I think that's too like baked into my DNA. I mean, I also have miniatures. I'm such an unapologetic. Like I just love games. Like I've got 40K miniatures behind me. But I card games. That's my most treasured gaming memories are all in card games. I love them. So it'd be hard for me to get away. And now just having a little bit of for whatever reputation we can build as a company that's creating card games, I think will help us. What Ian and I have said is we want to make a game that would make sense to go to a convention and sit side by side with Gudnack. So not a direct competitor to Gudnack, so not the same thing, but like when you look at it, you're like, oh, that makes sense. It's like this company makes
the same
Gudnack,
family.
and it's like, oh, so I would see they'd probably be good at making that. Like I think it'd be weird if we created like a Euro and be like, okay, this is about wine country Burgundy, let's go. Like so
I have that problem.
Do you? I think and I mean maybe that's why like going the publishing route can make sense for some designers, is like they're like, oh, like this would make sense in Asmodee's portfolio. Well, I guess their portfolio is everything now, but whoever's portfolio, whereas like this would make sense for my self-published thing. But yeah, I think all of my game design DNA is like
cards. Yeah, card games. So you were talking just shifting back to your perspective around expandability and also ways of increasing collectability. And at the beginning, you're talking about the challenges of card games that in terms of cost and why it may make sense for companies to invest so much into relatively expensive requirements for people to spend quite a bit of money in order to get started into a system is just the sheer amount of art that you need in order to sustain one of these things. And obviously, a lot of people are talking about AI and the role of that in art. I imagine that your perspective is very artist forward. But how are you how do you see that when you're thinking about not just, not just Gudnack, but like the stuff that you see in general, maybe your feeling about it? Is there a place for generative AI in artwork for games at all?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I think the community should rely on my answer for the definitive answer.
Yeah, I think
exactly.
We're all waiting.
Yeah, we should litigate based on this particular answer. Yeah, I mean, certainly, like, there's a point in the process where it can be useful. I've seen a lot of people prototyping with it. I think that's cool. But I don't know, like, this comes back to philosophically, like, what are we getting into this for? I think, like, getting a game made and being proud of that game have been they've been so intertwined for me. Like, it's never been like, oh, I just want to check this box. It's like, I want to check this box, and like, also, this is going to sound corny, but like, this is more my life's work than anything else I've ever contributed to.
Doing it right, not just doing it.
Yeah. And so, like, if I looked back and was like, you know what, I got it out there and I cut a lot of corners, I think I would feel weird about it. And I think the difference there would be, there'd be a monetary difference. Like, maybe I'd have some more of that money from Kickstarter 1 chilling. But yeah, I don't think I would have the same sense of pride. So that's where, like, I think I've always been with it, and I don't think generative AI would give me that sense of pride. And so I think where I'm at, and what I'm glad to see our community is doing, is they're understanding, if AI is doing anything good, it is creating a better understanding of, like, that art does cost money. These are real people that need to eat. Victoria is, I promise you, a real human. Actually, you can come meet her at, we bring her to conventions a lot so that she can prove she's a human. Her website's
victoria.ai, right?
Yeah, she's just...
We'll meet her.
Yeah, the Italians are so ahead when it comes to lifelike robots. No, but yeah, she's amazing. And I think when you do, part of that is, it's intentional on our part to say, like, no, this is part of the game. And part of the reason why people stop to look at the game is that the art is amazing. The part of the reason why we all play games is to engage with, like, a piece of art. I think a lot about that. Like, when I look at a game, like, I'm kind of judgy about the way it looks on the table matters a lot to me. Like, I want to be playing something that is beautiful. Actually, I have this weird pet peeve right now with spiral bound notebooks as game mats. Have you seen that? Like, where games are using the spiral bound notebook as their board, and, like, something about it doesn't read right to me. Like, I'm like, it doesn't feel like a game right now. It feels like I'm, like, in a workbook. That's my current pet peeve with it. But yeah, so like, I love that our community is, like, seeing that. I hope that they're going to continue, like, to pay for art, to support artists. And I think that extends beyond just visual art as well. So we're working with writers right now to create an anthology of Gudnack fiction that we'll have for sale at conventions, because we love our game world. And we think that there's great creative artists there. And none of these people are making a ton of money, and they are all the exact people who you want to hang out with. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So yeah, totally. It's like, they're the best people. Like, every time I'm on a phone call, I'm like, this is my favorite thing to do. They're all delightfully nerdy. All they want to do is, like, write fantasy stories about, like, a skeleton king that for some reason has a vendetta against his twin brother. That's gonna be their whole month, And so you definitely want to talk to them. And the same with Victoria. Is like, I've never seen someone get so excited about, like, medieval weaponry. Like, she's like, we could give this person a man catcher, and you're like, what's that? And she's like, it's a pole arm, you're gonna love it. And you're like, great, okay. And so, I want to support those people. And I think the way to do that is to in this industry is by unfortunately, I think you have to charge a little bit more money for your game. But I hope, and what I've seen so far, is that the players that you can attract with the type of product that we're putting out, like they're more than fine. And we're not talking about like the difference between, $40 and $4,000. It's like, maybe the game happens to end up being more like $50 or $60 for a box that, someone with generative AI could produce for 35. But, if that money goes towards like producing more cool stuff that I want to engage with, like, yeah, it kind of works out.
In your explanation, there's a wish to do things the right way and to be on the right side, and to consider art as part of that game. Do you actively, like on the flip side, if you see someone who is clearly just using generative AI in their artwork, does that cloud your opinion of them, and does that make you less likely to want to support them as creators?
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, everyone's economic reality is different, so I feel lucky that I'm doing this like later in my life, having had a career for a while that has produced enough excess capital to invest. So I don't want to disparage anyone who's like getting started and using tools to like help them get started. But personally, as a consumer, the things I want to play are inevitably, they have the mark of their creator very much on them. And so it's just hard for me to get past. It's less like the tool they use, but I think it's it can just be a very strong indicator that this person might not be creating this with a value system that's aligned to the types of games that I want to play. I'd be like, well, like I don't have infinite time to sit down and play with my friends. When I do, I want something that has been lovingly crafted for our enjoyment and has the market, whether it's the designer or the writer, you just want to be engaging with that stuff that's like has passion put into it. And I'm not here to read like trashy AI novels. I'm here to read like good books, and the same with games. I'm not here to like play a game that someone just was like checking the box for a production deadline. It's like, oh, I want something that's like really awesome and has, otherwise I'll just play my game because my game's sick. No.
You won't even play those games anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll just be playing Gudnack all the time.
I already made the best one, so.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking some time to share your experience and to geek out about the Star Wars living card game.
Oh yeah, and by the way, huge shout out to the designer of that game, Eric Lang. If you ever see him at a convention, first of all, just Google a picture of him. You will never not see him at a convention because he's a very distinctive looking human. Not only in his physical appearance, but his energy. Like he looks the same in all these pictures because he just brings this infectious energy. And I had the pleasure of meeting him at this past Gen Con. For probably like the 15th time, because I always go up to him and make him sign cards for me. But just, I told him about that he inspired me to become a game designer, and like his energy was like, he instantly turned to like, oh my God, I'm so like excited. Like it's the best job in the world. Like he's just amazing. And so if you're an aspiring game designer and you get a chance, he probably designed one of your favorite games as well. He's just a great human. So go tell him that.
Cool. Well, if anybody out there would like to find more information about Gudnack, you can find it on Instagram at with the handle Gudnack Game. You can also go to Gudnack.com, or you can go on YouTube and visit the Chaotic Great YouTube channel. Gudnack is actually out and on sale now, so you'll be able to get all of that information in the links in the description below. Tim, thanks again.
Thanks so much.